Hello viewers and my dear students, welcome to my YouTube channel. I am Dr. Zahida Begum Sheikh, Assistant Professor, Department of Political Science, Government Degree College, Hayat Nagar. In my last session, I discussed about judiciary system. Under judiciary system, the topic which I covered the Supreme Court, the High Court, the subordinate courts and its relations. And it is a continuation session of judiciary system. Now I will talk about judicial activism, judicial review, right to constitutional remedies, writs and pill. So a series of lessons on judicial system, we shall try to discuss the concept of the independent judiciary system in India. We already discussed the purpose of judicial system. I hope that you have understood the concept of judiciary. We know that there is no present without the past and there is no future without the present. Therefore, in last session, namely the judicial system in India and Supreme Court, clearly explained the concept of higher judiciary and subordinate judiciary and various components there all and the other incidental matters. In this lesson, an attempt will be made to understand the components of judicial system and subsequently an attempt will be made to understand current issues. As part of this, we shall try to discuss the various judicial reforms and these lessons will give a clear outline of the developments that took place during last few years. In fact, this lesson highlights the necessity for the common man to understand the nuances of law in order to identify his rights and to enforce them effectively. Incidentally, it also discussed the various constitutional aspects, including the fundamental rights guarantees by the Constitution of India. The special focus of this lesson, however, would be on the judicial activism. Apart from that, this lesson will be give complete picture of the judiciary. I am going to discuss the most important remaining part of the judiciary system in India. That today's topic is judicial activism, judicial review, right to constitutional remedies, writs and public interest litigation, that is nothing but pill. So these all are a part of BA second year syllabus and very important concept for Indian judiciary. After viewing this series of lessons, it is expected that the viewers will be in a position to understand almost all the aspects relating to the working of the judicial system in India. Let's go to our introduction part. So, too much of a good thing can be bad, and democracy is no exception. Judicial review refers to the power of judiciary to review and determine the validity of law or an order. On the other hand, judicial activism refers to use of judicial power to articulate and enforce what is beneficial for the society in general and people at large. Or judicial activism means the power of the Supreme Court and the High Court but not the subordinate courts to declare the laws as unconstitutional and void. Judicial activism is a concept that originated in the US in 1947. It has been seen in India since the emergency days. Judicial activism is the judicial philosophy that the courts can and should go beyond the words of the Constitution or a statute to consider broader societal implications of its decisions. It is sometimes used as an antonym of judicial restraint. The definition of judicial activism and the specific decisions that are activists are controversial political issue. The question of judicial activism is closely related to constitutional interpretation, statutory construction, and separation of powers. The judiciary plays an important role in upholding and promoting the rights of citizens in a country. Active role of the judiciary in upholding the rights of citizens and preserving the constitutional and legal system of the country is known as judicial activism. This entails sometimes overstepping into the territories of the executive. Judicial activism gone too far is judicial overreach. assertion of judiciary and its power is referred to as judicial activism. It is also defined as an overactive judiciary. Few landmark cases that highlight judicial activism are Keshavananda Bharati versus Kerala and Minerva Mills versus Union of India and Indira Gandhi versus Raj Narayan case and SP versus Union of India, etc. So, the active role of the Indian judiciary, particularly that of the Supreme Court, has been appreciated both within and outside India. The independence ensured through the constitutional provisions in favor of the judiciary and subsequently strengthened by the judicial interpretation has definitely contributed to the present status of the Indian judiciary. Yet, in this sphere of judicial activism, there are also a few coexisting misconceptions that need to be understood in order to appreciate the activist role of the judiciary in India better. The concept of public interest litigation is always talked of when judicial activism is discussed. Public interest litigation made judicial activism possible in India. Before the court accepts a matter for adjudication, it must be satisfied that the person who approaches it has sufficient interest in the matter. The test is whether the petitioner has locus standi to maintain the action. This is intended to avoid unnecessary litigation. The legal doctrine that no one except the affected person can approach a court for a legal remedy was holding the field both in respect of private and public law adjudications until it was overthrown by the PIL wave. Judicial activism is seen as a success in liberalizing access to justice and giving relief to disadvantaged groups because of the efforts of Justice V.R. Krishna Iyer and P.N. Bhagavati. The Black's Law Dictionary defines judicial activism as judicial philosophy which motivates judges to depart from the traditional precedents in favor of progressive and new social policies. So, the methods of judicial activism. There are various methods of judicial activism, which is they are one judicial review, that is the power of the judiciary to interpret the constitution and to declare any such law or order of the legislature and executive void if it finds them in conflict with the constitution. And number 2, PIL. The person filling the petition must not have any personal interest in the litigation. This petition is accepted by the court only if there is interest of large public involved. Aggrieved party does not file the petition. PIL, which is manifestation of judicial activism, has introduced a new dimension to judiciary's involvement in public administration. The issue of locus standi and the procedure complexities have taken a backseat in the causes brought before the courts through PIL. In the beginning, the PIL was confined only to improving the lot of the disadvantaged sections of the society, who by reason of their poverty and ignorance was unable to seek justice, and therefore any member of society was permitted to file a case for appropriate directions. Consequently, the expectations of public went high and the demands on the courts to improve the administration by giving appropriate directions for ensuring compliances with statutory and constitutional perception or prescriptions increased. Beginning with the Ratlam municipality case, the sweep of PIL had encompassed a variety of causes. We will discuss a PIL in detail in next slides. So, number third method is constitutional interpretation, and number 4, access of international statutes for ensuring constitutional rights, and number 5, supervisory power of the higher courts on the lower courts. So, just move on our next, that is the significance of judicial activism. It is an effective tool for upholding citizens' rights and implementing constitutional principles when the executive and legislature fails to do so. Citizens have the judiciary as the last hope for protecting their rights when all other doors are closed. The Indian judiciary has been considered as the guardian and protector of the Indian Constitution. There are provisions in the Constitution itself for the judiciary to adopt a proactive role. That is the Article 13. Read with Article 32 and 226 of the Constitution provides power of judicial review to the higher judiciary to declare any executive, legislative or administrative action void if it is in contravention with the Constitution. According to experts, the shift from locus standi to public interest litigation made the judicial process more participatory and democratic. Judicial activism counters the opinion that the judiciary is a mere spectator. Okay, I repeat, judicial activism counters the opinion that the judiciary is a mere spectator. So, just move on the examples of judicial activism. It all stated when the Allahabad High Court rejected the candidature of Indira Gandhi in 1973. In 1979, the Supreme Court of India ruled that under trials in Bihar had already served time for more period than they would have had they been convicted. In Golaknath case, the questions in this case were whether amendment is a law and whether fundamental rights can be amended or not. Supreme Court contended that fundamental rights are not amenable to the parliamentary restriction as stated in Article 13, and that to amend the fundamental rights a new constitution assembly would be required. Also stated that Article 368 gives the procedure to amend the constitution but does not confer on parliament the power to amend the constitution. Focus in detail of this case. For the first time by a majority of 6 against 5, despite the earlier holding that parliament in exercise of its constituent power can amend any provision of the constitution, declared that the fundamental rights as enshrined in part 3 of the constitution are immutable and so beyond the reach of the amendatory process. The declaration of law by the Supreme Court that Indian Parliament has no power to amend any of the provisions of Part 3 of the Constitution became the subject matter of very animated discussion. If you focus on Keshavananda Bharati case, this judgment defined the basic structure of the Constitution. The Supreme Court held that although no part of the Constitution, including fundamental rights, was beyond the Parliament's amending power, the basic structure of the Constitution could not be abrogated even by a constitutional amendment. This is the basis in Indian law in which the judiciary can strike down any amendment passed by parliament that is in conflict with the basic structure of the constitution. If you in detail focus on Keshavananda Bharati had given a burial to the controversy of amendment of any of the provisions of the constitution. By a majority of 7 against 6, the court held that under Article 368, Parliament has undoubted power to amend any provision in the Constitution, but the amendatory powers does not extend to alter the basic structure of Constitution. So, if you focus on another famous case, that is 2G scam. The Supreme Court cancelled 122 telecom licenses and spectrum allotted to 8 telecom companies on the grounds that the process of allocation was flawed. The Supreme Court rolled out a blanket ban on firecrackers in the Delhi NCR area with certain exceptions in 2018. The Supreme Court invoked terror laws against alleged moneylender in Hassan Ali Khan. So just focus on next slide, that is the criticism about judicial activism. Judicial activism has also faced criticism several times. In the name of judicial activism, the judiciary often mixes personal bias and opinions with the law. Another criticism is that the theory of separation of powers between the three arms of the state goes for a toss with judicial activism. Many times, the judiciary, in the name of activism, interferes in administrative domain and ventures into judicial adventurism or judicial overreach. In many cases, no fundamental rights of any groups are involved. In this context, judicial restraint is talked about. If we discuss in detail, moreover, the concept of judicial activism faces certain criticisms. Firstly, it is often said that in the name of activism, judiciary often rewrites with the personal opinions. Secondly, the theory of separation of powers is overthrown. However, its importance lies with position accorded to institution as a place of hope for aggrieved persons. A criticism that we often hear about judicial activism is in the name of interpreting the provisions of the Constitution. The allegations are that judiciary very often rewrites them without explicitly stating so. In the process, some of the personal opinions of the judges metamorphose into legal principles and constitutional values. Another criticism is that the name of, I already discussed that judicial activism. The theory of separation power is overthrown and the judiciary is undermining the authority of legislature and the executive by encroaching upon the spheres reserved for them. There is only a thin line of separation between review and activism. While judicial review means to decide if the law or act is consistent with the Constitution, judicial activism is more of a behavioral concept of the judge concerned. It is majorly based on public interest, speedy disposal of cases, etc. With the power of judicial review, the courts act as a custodian of the fundamental rights. Thus, the power of judicial review is recognized as the part of the basic constitution of India. The activist role of the judiciary is implicit in the said power. With the growing functions of a modern state, judicial intervention in the process of making administrative decisions and executing them has also increased. In addition, judicial activism, keeping in view the ideals of democracy, is in fact necessary to ensure that unheard voices are not buried by more influential and vocal voices. So, just focus on questions related in judicial activism for competitive exams. What is the example of judicial activism? An example of judicial activism is the famous Keshavananda Bharati case. So, if another question, that is, what is the difference between judicial activism and judicial restraint? Both are opposing concepts. While judicial activism talks about courts taking on a proactive role in ensuring and protecting citizens' rights, judicial restraint encourages the judiciary to limit the exercise of their own power. Slight difference, please concentrate on that. And if they ask about is judicial activism is good, so judicial activism can be good if the intention of the court is to protect and preserve the rights of citizens and not merely criticize the government. So this is all about judicial activism and related questions. If you focus on our next topic, that is judicial review. Judicial review refers to the powers of the judiciary to review and determine the validity of a law or an order. There are many examples of judicial review. You will know some judicial review examples and more about this concept in this class. India has an independent judiciary with extensive jurisdiction over the acts of legislature and executive. Judicial review is defined as the doctrine under which executive and legislative actions are reviewed by the judiciary. Even though we have in India the principle of separation of powers of the three arms of the state, namely the executive, the legislative, and the judiciary. The judiciary is vested with the power of review over actions of the other two arms or other two organs. Judicial review is considered a basic structure of the constitution. It is I already discussed about Indira Gandhi versus Raj Narayan case, and also judicial review is the power of the courts to consider the constitutionality of acts of organs of government and declare it unconstitutional if it violates or is inconsistent with the basic principles of the constitution. This means that the power of the legislature to make laws is not absolute, and that the validity and the constitutionality of such laws are subject to review by the courts. So, judicial review is also called the interpretational and observer roles of the Indian judiciary. Sumoto cases and the public interest litigations with the discontinuation of the principles of locus standi have allowed to judiciary to intervene in many public issues even when there is no complaint from the aggrieved party. So judicial review and constitution according to means judicial review and constitution, if you talk about the articles, according to article 13(2) of the union or the state shall not make any law that takes away or abridges any of the fundamental rights, and any law made in contravention of the aforementioned mandate shall to the extent of the contravention be void. Judicial review is called upon to ensure and protect fundamental rights which are guaranteed in Part 3 of the Constitution. The power of the Supreme Court of India to enforce these rights is derived from Article 32 of the Constitution. This provides citizens the right to directly approach the Supreme Court to seek remedies against the violation of fundamental rights. So, if you focus on the classification of judicial review, we can classify judicial review into three categories. They are: 1. Reviews of legislative actions. This review implies the power to ensure that laws passed by the legislature are in compliance with the provisions of the Constitution. And number 2, review of administrative actions. This is a tool for enforcing constitutional discipline over administrative agencies while exercising their powers. Number 3, review of judicial decisions. This is seen in the Golaknath case, bank nationalization case, and Minerva Mills case, and Privy Purse abolition case, etc. So, if we discuss about some special focus on examples of judicial review, IT Act Section 66A in 2015, the SC means Supreme Court struck down Section 66A of the amended Information Technology Act 2000. This provided the punishment for sending offensive messages through a computer or any other communication device like a mobile phone or a tablet. A conviction could fetch a maximum of 3 years in jail and a fine. This was repealed by the Supreme Court on the grounds that this section fell outside Article 19(2) of the Constitution, which relates to freedom of speech. And if you focus on another case, that is Golaknath case 1967, the question in this case was whether amendment is a law and whether fundamental rights can be amended or not. I already discussed in this case as a part of judicial activism also. So, if you focus in detail, Supreme Court contended that fundamental rights are not amendable to the parliamentary restriction as stated in Article 13, and that to amend the fundamental rights a new constituent assembly would be required. also stated that Article 368 gives the procedure to amend the Constitution but does not confer on Parliament the power to amend the Constitution. This case is also sometimes cited as an example of judicial activism, judicial review, pill, writs, etc. So, if you focus on the next part of this judicial review is limitations of judicial review, there are some limitations on the judiciary on exercising its power of judicial review. In fact, when the judiciary crosses its threshold and interferes in the executive mandate, it can be called judicial activism, which when furthered can lead to judicial overreach. Some of the limitation of judicial review are: it is only permissible to the extent of finding if the procedure in reaching the decisions have been correctly followed but not the decision itself. And another one, it is designated only to the high courts like the Supreme Court and the High Court. The judiciary cannot interfere in political questions and policy matters unless absolutely necessary. So, if we focus on questions related to judicial review, what is the purpose of judicial review? The purpose of judicial review is to make sure the laws passed by the legislature are not unconstitutional. It is also used to enforce constitutional discipline over administrative agencies. If you focus on next question, is judicial review mentioned in Indian Constitution? So the answer is the term judicial review is not mentioned in the Constitution. However, it provides for the concept of judicial review. And another question, what is the difference between judicial review and writ? Answer is, writs are issued by the higher courts upon violation of fundamental rights, whereas judicial review is the power of the court to review and validate laws passed. And another important question which might become, can high courts do judicial review? Answer is, the high court can exercise judicial review in addition to administrative control over the lower courts within its limits. So just focus on our next important topic in this section, that is Article 32, right to constitutional remedies. Part 3 of the Constitution provides for legal remedies for the protection of fundamental rights against their violation by the state or the other institutions or individuals. It entitles the citizens of India to move the Supreme Court or High Court for the enforcement of these rights. The state is forbidden from making any law that may be conflict with the fundamental rights. So, fundamental rights are the rights that grant individuals equality in every aspect, irrespective of race, color, caste, religion, birthplace, or gender. These rights are mentioned under Articles 12 to 35 of the Indian Constitution. There are predefined punishments in case of violation of these rights upon the discretionary of the judiciary. There is a right in India which states that a person can move to Supreme Court if he or she wants to get their fundamental rights protected. The rights comes under Article 32 for Supreme Court and Article 226 for the High Court. It is known as the right to constitutional remedies. In this right, the Supreme Court as well as High Court is given the power to instill the fundamental rights. Furthermore, the power can be issued by the local courts also extended the rights. Although there is one act which comes under the military law known as the court martial, which is exempted for this right. So, Dr. B.R. Ambedkar, father of the Constitution, said that Article 32 is the soul of the Constitution and it is the very heart of it. Also, the Supreme Court has included this in its basic structure doctrine. Furthermore, the right states that the right to move to the highest court cannot be rejected by any court except provided by the Constitution of India. Thus, it means that this right is suspended at the time of national emergency under Article 359. Under Article 32, Supreme Court acts as a guarantor and defender of the fundamental rights. Furthermore, it is originally under the Supreme Court's jurisdiction power to issue the rights. Thus, it means that a person can directly approach the Supreme Court for the remedy instead through the way of appealing. A right coached in the a writ is coached in the form of a letter or is percept in writing. It is running in the name of the king or state or president issued from the justice court. So this is sealed by its seal and addressed to an officer of the law or directly to a person who is commanded for action by the court. Thus this is done either during the commencement of the suit or is incidental to its progress. It requires the performance of the mentioned actor by giving the command to have it done. Also, it is important to note that Article 32 can be invoked only to get remedies related to fundamental rights. Thus, it cannot be there for any legal or constitutional right. For these rights, there are different laws available. So, in case the differences between the Article 32 and Article 226 are the Supreme Court and High Court. As mentioned above, the Supreme Court can issue the writ through Article 32. While the High Court can issue this right through Article 226. Supreme Court can issue the writ for enforcement which is done through because of fundamental rights, while the High Court can issue the enforcement of fundamental rights along with the rights of other matters. So it can be said that the High Court has a wider jurisdiction than the Supreme Court when it comes to the matter of issuing writs. The High Court can issue a writ only under its own territorial jurisdiction, while the Supreme Court can issue it against a person or authority within the boundaries of India. We will detailedly discuss these differences between Supreme Court and High Court in related next slides. So, the suspension of fundamental rights. Fundamental rights can be suspended in the case of national emergency as mentioned under Article 352. The 6 fundamental rights under Article 19 are automatically suspended in case under national emergency is imposed on grounds of war or external aggression, which is stated under Article 358. Article 359 has the clause for suspension of the other rights. In that case, a separate notification has to be issued by the President. The rights mentioned under Article 20 and 21 can never be suspended. Please remember, the rights mentioned under Article 20 and 21 can never be suspended. Constitutional emergency and financial emergency cannot affect the fundamental rights. So, if we focus on our next part, that is writs. What is a writ? Writs are written order issued by the Supreme Court. Kindly please focus on this, it is very important. So listen carefully the explanation, please. Writs are written order issued by the Supreme Court of India to provide constitutional remedies in order to protect the fundamental rights of citizens from a violation. So if you focus the facts about writs in India, Article 32 also empowers Parliament to authorize any other court to issue these writs. Before 1950, only the High Courts of Calcutta, Bombay, and Madras had the power to issue the writs. Article 226 empowers all the High Courts of India to issue the writs. Writs of India are borrowed from English law where they are known as prerogative writs. So, if you focus on what is the writ petition, a writ petition is essentially a court petition for extraordinary review, asking a court to intervene in a lower court's decision. Under the Indian legal system, jurisdiction to issue prerogative writs is given to the Supreme Court and to the High Courts of Judicature of all Indian states. Parts of the law relating to writs are set forth in the Constitution of India. If you focus types of writs in India, Supreme Court of India is the defender of the fundamental rights of the citizens. For that, it has original and wide powers. It issues five kinds of writs for enforcing the fundamental rights of the citizens. So, the five types of writs are habeas corpus, mandamus, prohibition, certiorari, and quo warranto. Viewers should go through these writs one by one, as all of these are very important for competitive exams and can help score well if understood with clarity. So please focus on that. Listen carefully the explanation. So first writ is habeas corpus. The Latin meaning of the word habeas corpus is to have the body of. Through habeas corpus, Supreme Court or High Court orders one person who has arrested other person to bring the body of the latter before the court. Habeas corpus is a writ that is enforced in order to protect the fundamental right to liberty of an individual against unlawful detention. This writ commands a public official to deliver a detained person in front of the court and provide valid reasons for the detention. However, this writ cannot be issued in case the proceeding is for contempt of a legislature or a court. So, if you focus facts about habeas corpus in India, Supreme Court or High Court can issue this writ against both private and public authorities. Habeas corpus cannot be issued in some cases, that is when detention is unlawful or when the proceedings is for contempt of a legislature or a court, or detention is by a competent court, or detention is outside the jurisdiction of the court. And we focus on our next writ, that is mandamus. The literal meaning of the writ is we command. This writ is issued by the court to order the public official who has failed to perform his duty or refused to do his duty to resume his work. Besides public official, mandamus can be issued against any public body or any corporation or an inferior court, a tribunal or government for the same purpose. The writ of mandamus is issued to a subordinate court, an officer of the government or a corporation or other institution commanding the performance of certain acts or duties. Unlike habeas corpus, mandamus cannot be issued against a private individual. The writ of mandamus can be used to order the completion of task, or in other cases it may require an activity to be ceased. Okay. If we focus the facts about mandamus in India, unlike habeas corpus, mandamus cannot be issued against a private individual. In certain cases, mandamus cannot be issued. The cases are the enforced departmental instruction that does not possess statutory force. And next one, to order someone to work when the kind of work is discretionary and not mandatory. And next one, to enforce a contractual obligation. And next one, mandamus can't be issued against Indian president or state governors and against the chief justice of a high court acting in a judicial capacity. So if we focus on our next writ, that is prohibition. The literal meaning of prohibition is to forbid. A court which is higher in position issues prohibition writ against a court which is lower in position to prevent the latter from exceeding its jurisdiction or usurping a jurisdiction that it does not possess. Prohibition is a writ issued by a higher court to lower court to enforce inactivity in the jurisdiction. It happens only in case the higher court is of the discretion that the case falls outside the jurisdiction of the lower court. Writ of prohibition can only be issued against judicial and quasi-judicial authorities. If we focus the facts about prohibition in India, writ of prohibition I discussed that can only be issued against judicial and quasi-judicial authorities. It can't be issued against administrative authorities, legislative bodies, and private individuals or bodies. So, if you focus on our next writ, that is certiorari. The literal meaning of the writ of certiorari is to be certified or to be informed. The writ of certiorari is issued to a lower court directing that the transfer of a case for review, usually with the intention of overruling the judgment of the lower court. The Supreme Court issues the writ of certiorari in the decision passed by the lower court is challenged by the party. It is issued in case the higher court finds it a matter of over jurisdiction or lack of jurisdiction. It is one of the mechanisms by which the fundamental rights of the citizens are upheld. This writ is against issued by a court higher in authority to a lower court or tribunal, ordering them either to transfer a case pending with them to itself or to squash their order in a case. It not only prevents but also cures the mistakes in the judiciary. So, facts about certiorari in India. Pre-91, the writ of certiorari used to be issued only against judicial and quasi-judicial authorities and not against administrative authorities. But post 1991, Supreme Court ruled that the certiorari can be issued even against administrative authorities affecting the rights of individuals. It cannot be against legislative bodies and private individuals or bodies. If you focus on next writ, that is quo warranto. The literal meaning of the writ of quo warranto is by what authority or warrant. Supreme Court or High Court issue this writ to prevent illegal usurpation of a public office by a person or illegal usurpation of a public office by a person. Through this writ, the court inquires but by what authority the person supports his or her claim. Through this writ, the court inquires into the legality of a claim of a person to public office. This writ prevents the illegal assumption of a public office by an individual. So, facts about quo warranto in India. Quo warranto can be issued only when the substantive public office of a permanent character created by a statute or by the constitution is involved. It can't be issued against private or ministerial office. Note that this writ gives the right to seek redressal to any individual other than the aggrieved person. So, if we focus that our next topic in this regard, how writ jurisdiction of Supreme Court differs from that of High Court. I already discussed some points. If we go detailed, where Article 32 of Indian Constitution empowers the Supreme Court to issue writs, Article 226 empowers High Courts of India. However, there are a few differences between the writ jurisdiction of both the courts which are given. If the difference in the point of purpose, Supreme Court purpose is to only enforce fundamental rights, but High Court purpose is to enforce fundamental rights, but also for other purposes. The expression for any other purpose refers to the enforcement of any ordinary legal right. So, if the issue of territorial jurisdiction, the Supreme Court against a person or government throughout the territory of India, but High Court against a person residing, government or authority located within its territorial jurisdiction only. Outside or outside its territorial jurisdiction only if the cause of action arises within its territorial jurisdiction. If the purpose is or if the difference is in case of power, Supreme Court Article 32 is a fundamental right. Supreme Court may not refuse to exercise its power to issue the writs. But in the matter of High Court, discretionary may refuses to exercise its powers to issue writs. So these are all the differences between the High Court and Supreme Court about writs. So if you focus, what is the status of writs in other countries? The writs other than the habeas corpus are discretionary remedies and have been known as prerogative orders in England and Wales since 1938. The writs of quo warranto and precedence or prohibition are now obsolete. The modified names of certiorari, mandamus and prohibition are mentioned under the new Civil Procedures Rules 1998 known as quashing orders, mandatory orders or prohibiting orders respectively. Mandamus has been replaced by the injunction in the United States District Courts. The Supreme Court of the US grants certiorari while the Supreme Court of other states grant review. So if you focus the questions related writs, if they ask which article in Indian Constitution empowers Parliament to authorize any court to issue writ, answer is the Article 32 of Indian Constitution. And another question, which writ is issued by High Court or the Supreme Court to order an authority to perform a function that it was not performing? That is, mandamus writ is issued by the court to compel an authority to resume its work. If we focus our last question in writs, which writ called the defender of fundamental rights? That is, the answer is writ of habeas corpus. So, if we focus on our next slide and next topic in this session, very important PIL, that is public interest litigation. Public interest litigation, that is PIL, implies litigation for the protection of public interests. This is an important concept in law and polity and is often seen in the news every day. So, public interest litigation in India, if you see in India, a public interest litigation is introduced in a court of law not by the aggrieved party but by a private party or by court itself. Pills have become a potent tool for enforcing the legal obligation of the executive and the legislature. The chief objective behind public interest litigations are ensuring justice to all and promoting the welfare of the people. It is generally used to safeguard group interests and not individual interests, for which fundamental rights have been provided. The Supreme Court of India and the High Court have the right to issue pills. The concept of pills stem from the power of judicial review. The concept of public interest litigations have diluted the principle of locus standi, which implies that only the person or party whose rights have been infringed upon can file petitions. It has most ideally and commonly been used to challenge the decisions of public authorities by judicial review, to review the lawfulness of a decision or action or failure to act by a public body. So, public interest litigations have played an important role in Indian polity or India's politics. They have been responsible for some landmark judgments in India, such as the banning of instant triple talaq, opened up the doors of the Shabarimala and the Haji Ali shrines to women, legalized consensual homosexual relations, and legalized passive euthanasia, and so on. So, what is the procedure to file a public interest litigation in India? Any Indian citizen or organization can move the court for a public interest or cause by filing a petition in the Supreme Court under Article 32, in the High Court under Article 226. The court can treat a letter as a writ petition and take action on it. The court has to be satisfied that the writ petition complies with the following: the letter is addressed by the aggrieved person or a public spirited individual or a social action group for the enforcement of legal or constitutional rights to any person who upon poverty or disability are not able to approach the court for redress. The court can also take action on the basis of newspaper reports if it is satisfied with the case. Public interest litigation is a good thing when it is used to enforce the rights of the disadvantaged. But it has now been diluted to interfere with the power of the government to take decisions on a range of policy matters. Yes. Judicial activism is not an easy concept to define. It means different things to different persons. Critics denounce judicial decisions and activists when they do not agree with them. Activism, like beauty, is often in the eye of the beholder. In India, the opening up of access to courts to the poor, indigent, and disadvantaged sections of a nation through public interest litigation, popularly known by its acronym PIL, is unexceptionable judicial activism. So, from 1979, the judiciary led by the Supreme Court in India became relevant to the nation in a manner not contemplated by the makers of the Constitution and became an active participant in the dispenser of social justice. It is a matter of concern that over the years this original, beneficial, and unexceptionable character of the court's activism in PIL has been largely converted into a general supervisory jurisdiction to correct actions and policies of government, public bodies, and authorities. This is a type of judicial activism unparalleled in any other judiciary. For basic rights, PIL jurisdiction began heartily with the little idea of its potential when the Supreme Court in 1979 entertained complaints by social activists drawing the attention of the court to the conditions of certain sections of societies or institutions which were deprived of their basic rights. So, if you focus the history of public interest litigation in India, in 1979, Kapila Hingorani filed a petition and secured the release of almost 40,000 under trials from Patna's jail in famous Husainara Khatun case. Hingorani was a lawyer. This case was filed in the Supreme Court before a bench led by Justice P.N. Bhagavati. Hingorani is called the mother of PILs as a result of this successful case. The court permitted Hingorani to purpose case in which she had no personal locus standi, making PILs a permanent fixture in Indian jurisprudence. In 1979, Supreme Court advocate Kapila Hingorani drew the court's attention to a series of articles in a newspaper exposing the plight of Bihar under trial prisoners, most of whom had served pre-trial detention more than the period they could have been imprisoned if convicted. Sunil Batra, a prisoner, wrote a letter to Justice Krishna Iyer of the Supreme Court, drawing his attention to torture by prison authorities and the miserable conditions of prisoners in jails. This was taken up as a petition, and the court passed orders for human conditions in jails. In 1980, two professors of law wrote a letter to the editor of a newspaper describing the barbaric conditions of detention in the Agra Protective House for Women, which was made the basis of a writ petition in the Supreme Court. The exploitation of workmen at construction sites in violation of labor laws was brought to the attention of the Supreme Court by a letter. The slave like condition of bonded laborers in quarries was brought to the attention of the court by a activist organization. A journalist moved the court against the evictions of pavement dwellers of Bombay. Several cases of this type followed. In dealing with such cases, the court evolved a new regime of rights of citizens and obligations of the state and devised in new methods for its accountability. In 1982, Justice P. N. Bhagavati correctly stated the purpose of PIL as it originated. He emphasized that PIL, public interest litigation, is strategic arm of the legal aid movement, which is intended to bring justice with the reach of the poor masses who constitute the low visibility area of humanity, is a totally different kind of litigation from the ordinary traditional litigation. So, no longer were the courts clientele drawn from landlords, businessmen, corporations, and affluent persons. With PIL, the common man, the disadvantaged and marginalized sections of society had also easy access to the court with the help of the social activists. This unique judicial activism was not found in other countries, and leading judges abroad such as Lord Harry Wolff and UK and Justice Michael Kirby of Australia applauded it. Justice Bhagavati did a lot to ensure that the concept of pills was clearly enunciated. He did not insist on the observance of procedural technicalities and even treated ordinary letters from public minded individuals as writ petitions. Justice Bhagavati and Justice V.R. Krishna Iyer were among the first judges in the court to admit public interest litigations. So, if we focus the significance of public interest litigation in India, the original purpose of pills have been to make justice accessible to the poor and the marginalized. It is an important tool to make human rights reach those who have been denied rights. It democratizes the access of justice to all. Any citizen or agency who is capable can file petition on behalf of those who cannot or do not have the means to do so. It helps in judicially monitoring state institutions like prisons, asylums, protective homes, etc. It is an important tool in judicial review. So, if we focus the new intervention of PIL is, however, over the years, the social action dimension of public interest litigation has been diluted and eclipsed by another type of public cause litigation in courts. In this type of litigation, the court's intervention is not sought for enforcing the rights of the disadvantaged or poor sections of the society, but simply for correcting the actions or omissions of the executive or public officials or departments of governments or public bodies. Examples of this type of interventions by the courts are innumerable. In the interest of preventing pollution, the Supreme Court ordered control over automobile emissions, air and noise and traffic pollution, gave order for parking charges, wearing of helmets in cities, cleanliness in housing colonies, disposal of garbage, control of traffic in New Delhi, made compulsory the wearing of seat belts, ordered action plans to control and prevent the monkey menace in cities and towns, ordered measures to prevent accidents at unmanned railway level crossings, and prevent ragging of college freshmen, for collection and storage in blood banks, and for control of loudspeakers and banning of firecrackers. In recent orders, the Supreme Court has directed the most complex engineering of interlinking rivers in India. The court has passed orders banning the pa- pasting of black film on automobile windows. On its own, the court has taken notice of Baba Ramdev being forcibly evicted from the Ramlila grounds by the Delhi administration and censured it. The court has ordered the exclusion of tourists in the core area of tiger reserves. All these managerial exercises by the court are hung on the dubious jurisdictional peg of enforcing fundamental rights under Article 32 of the Constitution. In reality, no fundamental rights of individuals or any legal issues are at all involved in such cases. The court is only moved for better governance and administration, which does not involve the exercise of any proper judicial function. In its most activist and controversial interpretation of the Constitution, the Supreme Court took away the constitutionally conferred power of the President of India to appoint judges after consultation with the Chief Justice and appropriate this power in the Chief Justice of India and collegium of 4 judges. In no constitution in the world is the power to select and appoint judges conferred on the judges themselves. The court is made the monitor of the conduct of investigating and prosecution agencies who were perceived to have failed or neglected to investigate and prosecute ministers and officials of the government. Cases of this type are the investigation and the prosecution of ministers and officials believed to be involved in the Jain Hawala case, the fodder scam involving the former Chief Minister of Bihar Lalu Prasad Yadav, the Taj Corridor case involving the former Chief Minister of Uttar Pradesh Mayawati, and the recent prosecution of telecom minister and officials in the 2G telecom scam case by the Supreme Court. So, what about military operation? The Supreme Court has made an order even in a military operation. In 1993, the court issued orders on the conduct of military operations in Hazratbal, Kashmir, where the military had a matter of strategy restricted the food supplies to hostages. The court ordered that the provision of food of 1200 and calorific value should be supplied to hostages. Commenting on this, the Army General wrote, "For the first time in history, a court of law was asked to pronounce judgment on the conduct of an ongoing military operation. Its verdict materially affected the course of operation." Even proceedings of legislatures are controlled by the court. In the Jharkhand Legislative Assembly case, the Supreme Court ordered the Assembly to conduct a motion of confidence and ordered the Speaker to conduct proceedings according to the prescribed agenda and not to entertain any other business. Its proceedings were ordered to be recorded for reporting to the court. These orders were made in spite of Article 212 of the Constitution, which states that courts are not inquire into any proceedings of the legislature. If you go other examples also, matters of policy of government are subject to the court's scrutiny. Distribution of food grains to persons below poverty line was monitored, which even made the Prime Minister remind the court that it was interfering with the complex food distribution policies of government. In the 2G licenses cases, the court held that all public resources and assets are a matter of public trust and they can only be disposed of in a transparent manner by a public auction to the highest bidder. This has led to the President making a reference to the court of the court's legal advice under Article 143 of the Constitution. In the same case, the court set aside the expert opinion of the Telecom Regulatory Authority of India, that is TROI, to sell 2G spectrum without auction to create greater teledensity in India. The court has for all practical purposes disregarded the separation of powers under the constitution and assumed a general supervisory function over other branches of governments. The temptation to rush to Supreme Court and 21 high courts for any grievances against a public authority has also deflected the primary responsibility of citizens themselves in a representative self-government of making legislatures and the executive responsible for their actions. The answer often given by the judiciary to this type of overreach is that it is compelled to take upon this task as the other branches of government have failed in their obligations. On this specious justification, the political branches of government may, by the same logic, take over functions of the judiciary when it has failed, and there can be no doubt that there are many areas where the judiciary has failed to meet the expectations of the public by its inefficiency and areas of cases. Justice Jackson of the US has aptly said the doctrine of judicial activism, which justifies easy and constant readiness to set aside decisions of other branches of government, is wholly incompatible with a faith in democracy, and in so far it encourages a belief that judges should be left to correct the result of public indifference. It is a vicious teaching. Unless the parameters of public interest litigations are strictly formulated by the Supreme Court and strictly observed, public interest litigation, which is so necessary in India, is in danger of becoming diffuse, unprincipled, encroaching into the functions of other branches of the government, and ineffective by its indiscriminate use. So, if we focus on criticism of public interest litigation, that is, of late, pills have become a tool for publicity. People file frivolous petitions which result in the wastage of time of the courts. People have used them with a political agenda as well. They unnecessarily burden the judiciary. Even if the petition is eventually dismissed, the courts spend time and effort on them before dismissing them. And next criticism is, at present only judges have the power to dismiss a petition. The registry of Supreme Court or High Court only ensures that the technical requirements of filing a petition are fulfilled, as a result of which petitions are admitted to the court irrespective of the merits of the case. Current affairs related to pill in India. Various news keep on revolving pill in India, as it is one of the most accessible public instruments that can used to seek judicial actions. Check the latest news related to pill. That is, public interest litigation was moved to quash the PM CARES fund. Public interest litigation has been filed in the Supreme Court of India seeking directions to the Government of India to make arrangements in order to rescue and bring the Indian migrant standards in Gulf countries. A petition has been filed before the Supreme Court of India seeking directions of states, their municipal authorities, and local self government authorities to ensure protection of rights of the sanitation workers who are also essential service providers amidst the nationwide lockdown in wake of COVID-19 outbreak. So this is all about public interest litigations. If we focus the questions related to public interest litigations, they are, what is considered in public interest? Answer is, if it refers to legal practices undertaken to help economically weak or marginalized people, or to effect change in social policies in the public interest, or not for profit times. And another question, who can file public interest litigation? Any person can file a public interest litigation. The petitioner need not be the aggrieved person. Even an organization can file a public interest litigation. And another question, how much does it cost to file a public interest litigation? The court fee for filing a public interest litigation is rupees 50 per respondent. one more important question in previous exams, that is pill public interest litigation a writ? A writ is answer is a writ is a written command given by a court. It can be to enforce an action or stopping an action from happening. A pill is a form of writ with just one specification, that the matter is related to the general well-being of the public instead of particular litigant. So, if we focus our conclusion, that is, in conclusion, we have examined the judicial review and we have examined the important issues related judicial activism and right to constitutional remedies and judicial, and another one writs, and another one pill. Many on both sides of the political aisles accuse the Supreme Court of being overly activist and insufficiently differential to the elected representatives of the people. Taking the constitution away from the courts and giving it back to the people has become a rallying cry. But those who criticize the courts on this ground misunderstand the proper role of the judiciary. The courts should stand, kindly pay attention. This is very important for overall judiciary conclusion. So kindly focus and listen the explanation. Okay. The courts should stand in the way of democratic majorities in order to keep majority rule from the degenerating into majority tyranny. In doing so, the courts are bound to err on one side or the other from time to time. It is much better for the health of our constitutional democracy if they err on the side of the activism, striking down too many laws rather than too few. We need more judicial activism. Resting my argument on three grounds. First, constitutional theory suggests a need for judicial oversight of the popular branches. And second, our own constitutional history confirms that the founding generation, the drafters of our constitution, saw a need for a strong bulwark against majority tyranny. And finally, an examination of constitutional practice shows that too little activism produces worse consequences than does too much. If we cannot assure that the judges tread the perfect middle ground, it is better to have an overly aggressive judiciary than the overly restrained one. Judicial review is not judicial supremacy. Judicial review allows courts an equal say with the other branches, not the supreme word. Courts are the final arbiter to the constitution only to the extent that they hold a law unconstitutional, and even then only because they act last in time, not because their will is supreme. If judicial review is simply the implementation of courts' equal participation in government, what then is judicial activism? To avoid becoming mired in political squabbles, we need a definition of judicial activism with no political valence. Judicial activism occurs any time the judiciary strikes down an action of the popular branches. Whether state or federal, legislative or executive, judicial review, in other words, produces one of the two possible results. If the court invalidates the government action it is reviewing, then it is being activist. If it upholds the action, it is not. Under the definition, and because the court is not perfect, the question becomes whether we prefer a Supreme Court that strikes down too many laws or one that strikes down too few. Many contemporary constitutional scholars favor a differential court that invalidates too few. I suggest that we are better off with an activist court that strikes down too many. As many scholars have previously argued, judicial review is a safeguard against the tyranny of the majority, ensuring that our constitution protects liberty as well as democracy. And indeed, the founding generation expected judicial review to operate as just such a protection against democratic majorities. A court that is too differential cannot fulfill that role. More significant, however, is the historical record of judicial review. Although it is difficult to find consensus about much of what the Supreme Court does, that there are some cases that are universally condemned. Those cases offer a unique lens through which we can evaluate the relative merits of difference and activism. Are most of those cases the court's greatest mistakes, as it were overly activist or overly differential? It turns out that virtually all of them are cases in which the overly differential court failed to invalidate a governmental action. If we focus when the court fails to act, instead deferring to the elected branches, it abdicates its role as guardian of the enduring principles against the temporary passions and prejudice of popular majorities. It is thus no surprise that with historical hindsight we sometimes come to regret those passions and prejudice and fault the court for its passively. Ideally, of course, the court should be like baby bear. It should get everything just right, engaging in activism when only when we the people act it always ways that we will later consider shameful or regretful. But that perfection is impossible, and so we must choose between a court that views its role narrowly and a court that views its role broadly, between a more differential court and a more activist court. Both kinds of court will sometimes be controversial and both will make mistakes, but history teaches us that the cases in which the differential court fails to invalidate governmental acts are worse. Only a court inclined toward activism will vigilantly avoid such cases, and hence we need more judicial activism. I hope you have enjoyed this lesson. We'll meet again in the next lesson. I hope that you have I sincerely hope that you will enjoy and enlighten yourself various aspects of judiciary systems. Thank you. Thank you one and all.